I have a lot of Nerf darts. I mean, this isn't even all of them. But in this box is just enough variety and types to go over them and give you an idea of what they are for, so when you encounter them in the wild, you can be sure you're using the right type of dart for your blaster. Alright, let's get into it. I think the best place to start is with Nerf, because when we think of foam darts, we typically think of Nerf. And what better place to start than the classic full-length Nerf dart? If you see something with an orange tip and a blue foam body, you know that it's going to be a Nerf dart no matter who makes it. And this is pretty typical. We've seen these darts for about 20 years in this form. Now these are somewhat compatible with a lot of the older blasters as well. We'll touch about some of the older, more defunct Nerf blaster darts. But for now, we're just going to kind of cover some of the more modern ones. Now, graduating from the Nerf Elite Dart, we saw the Nerf Accustrike Dart. Now, the innovation here is the tip of the dart is got this special cut on the side that helps it fly a little more accurately. If you're given the choice between a Nerf Elite Dart and a Nerf Accustrike Dart, always choose the Accustrike Dart. Now, speaking of Accustrike darts, this is one of the newest dart types from Nerf. This is the half-length Accustrike Dart. This dart right here came with the Strife X and is Nerf's very first entry into the half-dart length world officially. Now here's the thing about this half-length Accustrike dart. It is great for flywheel blasters, however, it is not going to be so great for spring-powered blasters, especially in the performance realm. The reason for it is the tip of the dart isn't offset enough so that it could get jammed, or, well, at the very least, decrease your performance on some of these high-end, expensive performance blasters. Working our way up with some of the other Nerf darts here, we have the Nerf Mega Dart. These are a lot of fun. They have the whistle tip end there, so when you fire them, they do make that satisfying whistle sound. Not only is it a taller dart than the Nerf Elite one, it is also a wider dart. You're typically going to find that Nerf Mega Blasters do fire a little faster than your Elite counterparts. But because we had an Accustrike version of the Elite Dart, we also have an Accustrike version of the Mega Dart. Again, the difference is how the tip is constructed. Now, it's really kind of hard to show on camera, but if you can get a close look there, there are some of those triangle cutouts, but they're not as inset as the Nerf Elite Accustrike Dart. In terms of Nerf Mega Darts, those two are it. You might see some different color variations, but it's always the whistle tip one or the Mega Accustrike version. And either of those Mega Darts work well in spring power blasters or flywheel power blasters. For the longest time, Nerf Ultra Darts were not very well thought of by the community, and, well, it's a stark departure from the normal typical foam that we see from the Nerf Elite Darts and the Nerf Mega Darts. There is the normal Nerf Ultra Dart, there is the Accustrike Ultra Dart, which is, again, the superior dart. There's also one more. And here we have the Whistle Tip Ultra Dart. It's essentially the same as the normal Ultra Dart, but it just whistles. All right, we're moving right along. We've covered Elite, we've covered Mega, we've covered Ultra. I think it's time to cover Rival right now, because this, for the longest time, was Nerf's highest performing blaster series, and it's basically shooting these tiny little golf balls. Now, depending on the blaster, there are some hop-up tabs on there to increase the accuracy of these, but there is a more accurate version, the Accu-Rival rounds, that have bigger dimpling, which helps the Rival rounds fly a little more straight, or at least in a more predictable pattern. But shrinking down the Rival rounds even further is the Nerf Hyper round. This is a vastly different type of projectile for Nerf because it doesn't feel like any sort of standard foam. It feels rubbery, and when you fire these things, they bounce everywhere. So if you're playing these indoors, you kind of have to watch out for ricochets. And when it comes to Hyper, there is only one type of round here. There isn't an Accu-Hyper round, there isn't any other sort of round. It's just this one right here. And refills come in this hopper thing that you can attach to Nerf Hyper blasters to make refilling them a little easier, but again, you kind of have to watch out for that bounce when you're filling them up. And shrinking even more is the Nerf Gelfire rounds. Of course, these are dehydrated in the pack right here, but this is the gel-based ammo that Nerf uses for all the Gelfire blasters. You know, you can think of them as kind of like Orbeez. They take about 2 hours to hydrate, and unlike all these other darts that you can retrieve if you can find them, the Gelfire ones basically disintegrate on impact, and you really can't find them after that. Whew, there are a lot of darts, aren't there? And I think now it's time to tackle some of the larger Nerf ammo types. Here we have the Nerf Mega XL Dart. These are incredibly fun to use. They have the whistle tips on them, and the blasters are overly large, overly comically big, and they are just so much fun to use. Now, we haven't seen any new blasters from the Mega XL line. I really hope we see more of them because these are just massive projectiles. And to give you an idea, I can fit a normal Nerf Elite Dart in there, and I can put like a hyper round in there, and then I could top it off with a rival round if I wanted, and it would basically be a solid piece of like foam projectile there. And finally, the largest ammo type for Nerf here, we have the Demolisher rocket. We typically see this in the Fortnite series now. The reason it comes with the name Demolisher rocket is because it came with the Nerf Demolisher 2-in-1 blaster. Just think of it as a normal Nerf Strife with a rocket launcher attached underneath it. But since the Fortnite line came out, these became a lot more easy to find. It's great because for the longest time with Demolishers, these were difficult to find. Now, we covered all the official Nerf darts. There is one word of warning I want to give you, and that is this. No, this is not an official Nerf dart. This is a vinyl tip dart. This looks like an official Nerf dart, but the tip is a lot harder. You'll typically find these on those Amazon pages where they sell like 1,000 of them for like 20 cents. These typically aren't all that great of darts. What about some of the other style darts? Ones that we don't see anymore. I have a selection here. I don't have all of them because there are just some darts that are really hard to find, and I haven't been able to thrift them or find them in garage sales or other lots like that. But some of the older style darts that have a fond place in my heart, but we're just really not going to find these in a typical setting. You have to actively be looking for these or just stumble upon them and be like, hey, what's this? And hopefully if that's the case, then you'll be able to know, hey, I know what that is now. Let's start with this. This is the Vortex disc. A lot of people love these. A lot of people have great memories with them, but they are now discontinued. There was a revival of sorts at Target a few years ago, and it never really took off again, but we still have these Vortex discs. And what you typically find with these is that the foam around the outside is mauled or chewed or just degrading, and the solid plastic core middle part is probably in a little better condition. Now here is a green Nerf Ballistic ball. These came with things like the atomizer, and this is like an old school version of a rival round if you kind of want to consider it that.
How could I forget about the Streamline dart right here? It might look very similar to the Nerf Elite Dart, and that's because it is in terms of size, but the dart itself is very different. The head on these goes down quite a bit, and it causes these to fly very inaccurately.
No, this is not a yellow marshmallow. This is a foam plug for the Kenner Ghost Popper. Technically, this was before Nerf. However, Nerf did do a re-release of the Ghost Popper for the Ghostbusters Afterlife movie, and the foam plugs were the same dimension and shape as the original 1980s version. So it was a one-off re-release of this, and I don't think we're going to see these again, unfortunately.
And here's a classic dart that I almost forgot to talk about because I couldn't find one in time for the initial filming, but here it is. This is a dart tag Velcro dart at the end there, so it will stick on any sort of targets, as well as any of the dart tag vests to score points. This was Nerf's earliest attempts at making Nerf a sport.
Now we have some of the suction tip darts here. These are from the N-Strike days. You could find something like this in the Maverick. And here's something much older. These go to older 90s Nerf blasters that you can tell typically by the type of foam construction there is. There's this very soft foam for the N-Strike days, and now, over time, the older 90s darts are pretty crusty, they're harder, and they're not as padded. This is a suction tip dart, but it deserves a special call out. This is from the SuperMaxx line. It's a unique dart type because the solid foam core ends at about here, and there's only just a tiny little finger's width of hollowness to seat it inside of a SuperMaxx Nerf blaster. And I'm guessing the reason they did this is because all the SuperMaxx blasters were basically Super Soakers, but foam dart blasters. Having a more solid core dart was probably likely to help the dart survive a little longer with just some of the high pressures that those SuperMaxx blasters could give you. These are super hard to find as well, so if you have one of these, hang on to it. Alright, here's an old school Mega Dart. This again from Nerf in the 90s. This one was chewed at some point, but I'm still hanging on to it. I don't have very many of these. It will fly out of blasters, and it's good to test if I find a retro blaster and I need to know if it works. This isn't going to be the best performing dart, but it let me know if a blaster works or not. And here are some of the arrows. This one is from the Rebelle line, and this one is from the Nerf Zombiestrike Dreadnought. These can be used interchangeably. The only difference is the color of the tips, as well as the foam fletching at the bottom. Now, one interesting thing about these types of darts is because this is a plastic shaft here, they are prone to bending. So when they hit a surface, like a wall or a person, whatever kind of game you're playing, they will then absorb the shock, and then the arrow tip will bend slightly, causing them to not fly as straight for any remaining shots that you can get out of these things. We've talked a lot about darts, but typically we talk about Nerf, action figures, toys, collectibles, things like that. So if you want to see more, be sure to subscribe to this channel. And just like we talked about, there are going to be more dart types in the future. Thank you so much for watching. If you have a specific favorite dart, be sure to leave that in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time.